Welcome to Personal Injury Marketing Minute.
Welcome to the Personal Injury Marketing Minute, where we quickly cover the hot topics in the legal marketing world. I'm your host, Lindsey Busfield, the Vice President and Partner over at Optimize My Firm. For today's Spotlight on PILMMA episode, we are joined by Eric Sanchez and Stacie Monahan of Maestro Strategic Partners. Eric is a leader in the technology and operations space with a background in building large-scale systems and holding multiple patents. And Stacie brings decades of experience in law firm operations and process optimization, helping firms run more efficiently through intake to resolution. And Eric and Stacie are integrally involved in PILMMA and have helped facilitate so many different pieces and parts that many of us have come to appreciate and don't necessarily see all the behind the scenes work. And so I'm so excited to have Eric and Stacie with us today to talk about their involvement with PILMMA, what they're doing, what they're seeing in the market, and what we can expect from PILMMA this year. So thank you for joining us today, Eric and Stacie.
Thanks, Lindsey.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So that was a lot of information that I gave and really not a lot of substance to it. So walk us through a little bit more about who you guys are and what you do.
So Maestro Strategic Partners, we formed about 3 years ago. We work with firms from all different sizes, from boutique litigation firms that don't advertise to monster firms that never met a advertising channel they don't love. And every engagement's unique and different to those firms. Some firms want to really focus on the intake. Some firms want us to look at their tech stack. More increasingly, we sit in on vendor meetings with firms and really call balls and strikes on what people are being sold. As you know, a lot of snake oil out there masquerading as AI or just flat out unnecessary. And so we serve as kind of a buttress between those two dynamics.
Excellent. And Stacie, tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Yeah, so like Eric said, besides what we're doing in our own company, we've been helping PILMMA facilitate their Mastermind meetings, which have been fantastic. We just got back from Key West just a few days ago after being there about a month between the two of us, and got to see kind of what all these different firms of different sizes are struggling with and trying to help them through all the noise.
And so for those who are unfamiliar with PILMMA's mastermind groups or even mastermind groups in general, can you talk to us a little bit about what happens at these, how often they happen, and what you see?
Yeah, that's a great question. For what it's worth, I think every law firm should be in the mastermind group of some kind. So essentially, a mastermind group is a collection of law firms, typically the geographic specific. So a firm in Raleigh-Durham would not be with other firms in Raleigh-Durham. And so it's intended to facilitate transparent and free sharing of ideas. So what will happen is, at least how PILMMA does it, is it's really, fantastic. They will put out kind of their big organizational metrics, profitability, employee costs, et cetera. They'll talk about what's working, what's not working for them. Pretty candid and transparent discussions about vendors, vendor relationships. And so it's really kind of a safe space. It's almost like a blend of like a brainstorming session and family therapy.
Yeah.
It's really quite good. That was my impression.
And I think it is somewhat cathartic for them, because they really get to open up with someone kind of in the same position, but aren't competitors. So they do feel that safe space where they can really get everything out and actually get some genuine feedback in.
And that's so important because, there's a huge network of attorneys, but it can feel really isolating if you are working on your own in your own silo and it's you against the other 20 personal injury firms in your city and you have nobody to talk to. I mean, you could talk to your spouse,
Exactly.
but he or she's going to get really bored and tired of hearing about all of the different legal operations. So to have an outlet where you can share the issues that you have going on, both in terms of operations, but also the emotional pieces of that as well. It's so important to have that network to be able to grow as a law firm and be able to maintain that in a healthy, scalable way.
100%. And I think some law firm principals are more self-aware than others. I think what happens in firms of all sizes, by the way, is you run the risk of having an echo chamber. Like a lot of the principals fancy themselves as like, well, I listen to people or whatever. But if you're just looking at the four corners of your firm and how your firm does things, it necessarily impedes growth because it's almost like an algorithm that has inputs that it also controls. it totally undercuts the efficacy of the algorithm because you're not getting all of the new inputs. And so it really is important for people to come out of their comfort zones, and the mastermind groups just provide, a really safe environment to do that.
Well, especially with all the new technology that is coming about and how marketing is changing and how operations are changing, how even, deposition and discovery is changing. All of these different pieces have new tools that help facilitate them. So if you are only listening to people who have only done what you have done, because, let's face it, it's you and your team, you aren't getting the information that you need on what's worth investing in and what is snake oil and yeah, all of the different pieces that can help inform growing and scaling your practice and getting ahead of the times. So, talk to me a little bit about the discussions that you hear revolving around new technology and new innovation.
So from our perspective at Maestro, we have a philosophy where we believe people, process, and technology are the kind of the three legs of the table of success for a law firm, and really in that order. We actually, Stacie and I co-authored a book, Invested Leadership, and we posited this idea that people matter and you should care about people. And some would think that that's kind of archaic because AI is going to replace all these people. We're seeing this kind of over and over again. And the reality is, I think AI is going to replace people where there's extreme rigidity and a lack of adoption of AI. But the people that use AI are going to become even more important. And so it's going to become a doubling and tripling down on the value of people. And so for us, technology is that third thing that we mentioned, and technology has a role, but it's never been a magic bullet. It's never been a panacea. And one technology platform that works in one firm may not work in another because their people dynamic is off, their cultural, the culture is just not ready to change. And then the processes are not codified in any meaningful way. So they have no way of measuring the efficacy of the tool that they just bought. And so they've actually created a greater complication by injecting another technology into something that was already not very efficient.
Yeah, and there was a lot of discussions in these mastermind groups about new technologies that are trying, specifically AIs, what's working for them, what's not working for them. But another large part of the discussion was adoption by the staff. So that was, look, we know we have this great tool, or yes, I want to try this, but how am I getting my staff on board? So, and that's something else that we do too, is we help with that AI implementation to actually get people to see the immediate benefits, and can you kind of start to get buy-in from people.
Yeah, in fact, Stacie raises a good point. We had an engagement recently where the engagement was to integrate a new AI platform with this law firm. And we have a process where we drop into a law firm and we analyze it soup to nuts, top to bottom. It's like, we tell people it's like a colonoscopy, an endoscopy, and an MRI all at once. We really get into the nitty gritty.
That sounds uncomfortable.
I mean,
it's not as uncomfortable
And
as
it should be, because
but they do have to be ready to hear the information.
yeah, because it can be uncomfortable. We could call out somebody that's been there for 20 years or 15 years, and that in this particular example, the organization ultimately wisely put a pause on adopting a new technology and recognize that it had to get its people and its processes nailed down. And once it had that, then it could look at a new technology shift. And now it's a really exciting and cool time, because when you're talking about intake and case management, the next 6 to 9 months is going to be seismic in its shift. I mean, we're aware of different roadmaps and different things that are coming down the pike, that the world's going to be very different for law firms very quickly.
It is, and getting those pieces of the puzzle, the people and the processes in place first. I actually recently wrote an article about how AI and especially the AI chat agents are going to be shifting how people work. It's not going to change the fact that we're still working, but it's going to lean so much more into project management skills and being able to facilitate the different networks of AI agents and different AI tools that it's going to you're going to be required to have an in-depth knowledge not only of your field, but also have a knowledge of how to manage processes. And that's where I see the first major shift coming in the integration of AI products into legal operations.
Yeah, the analogy that we use is like the fictional, Iron Man, Tony Stark, smart guy by himself, but once he's, using technology, AI, he's a superhero, can fly, shoot lasers, the whole nine. And we think that's where the market is going, the workforce is going in the future.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that shifts. And right now, we're still in the infancy of all of these AI products that are out there, and some of them are really cool. I've seen some great demos of how AI can help with deposition and cross analysis of different information, and can save so much time from that grunt work that just kind of eats up with the mundane, monotonous stuff. But I've also seen some real horror stories where attorneys are using AI for their intake and not having those people and processes still in place. But it's like, oh, I'm going to go turf this over to an AI agent. And it just doesn't work. And especially when you have something as crucial as your intake just being snap replaced by AI, it might not be quite there yet. So, have you guys seen similar things on your side?
Yeah, we have.
Yes, I guess.
And certainly, I'm a little more cautious on client facing becoming just straight AI. So intake, which is you're exactly right, is not where you want to really take a chance on AI not working. Um, so I'm way more cautious about that. But I will say in these discussions, people have horror stories, like you said, of AIs that, didn't work for them. And so they'll say, oh, this company was terrible. But somebody else in the room might have started with them, the same AI company 6 months later, and be like having a great experience
Right.
because that's how quickly things are changing. So sometimes, if they had a bad experience with one of the AI products, it might be worth revisiting 6 months down the road when, all their technology, they've shifted into another area, they cleaned up the things that were wrong, so that's what some law firms have to get kind of used to is it might not be what you wanted before, but it might be there now. It just changes so quickly.
That's
The other thing I would say too is like the way that we think about a process and technologies, like when you talk about like intake and then you talk about like agentic AI, there are so many subsets in intake and there's so many subsets in agentic AI. If you're saying, well, what I mean by intake is doing the physical intake with a potential client, and if what you mean by AI is using kind of a natural language processing AI, well, we have a very different opinion about the present state of the art relative to emoting in like an agentic AI concept talking to a prospective client than we would say an agent that's scouring the intake and looking about whether or not something was missed or not. Two totally
Yeah,
different
that's
things
fantastic.
and
Yeah.
two totally different use cases. So it's not so simple as to say, and I know you certainly weren't saying this, but it's not so simple to say intake in AI is incompatible or intake in AI is compatible. It's much more complicated than that. And that then also that dynamic translates into the full operation of the law firm. But treatment management, treatment updates, medical record acquisition, medical record review, all of those subsets, they also need to be tightly analyzed on the efficacy of the AI and firms' willingness to adopt it.
right. And absolutely, that's a great point because yes, when I say intake, I was meaning the
Sure.
initial phone call, and yeah, it's just not there yet. But there's so much opportunity for AI to come in and assist with the fine details and looking at patterns and looking at gaps that might be happening and looking for opportunities to enhance a case. So yes, I think definitely now there are some great tools that are coming out that can assist with some of those processes. And if you are finding a cool new tool, you might just have to be comfortable being the guinea pig for it
Right.
and just take
Yeah.
it with a grain of salt that, yeah, I'm willing to take a bit of a risk on this. And you have to decide for yourself and your firm and your unique circumstances. How much of a risk are you willing to take, and where along your operations are you willing to take that risk? So,
And how quickly can you pivot back if it does fail? I mean,
Right.
that's important too. So if you wipe out your intake team because you're trying just an AI voice agent, you're going to have a problem. You might want to test it maybe at late at night. You test it, where you don't have live staff on, but don't wipe out your team. You got to be able to pivot back.
that's a great point. Yes, being able to be agile and flexible with this as we all are starting to get to know how AI is going to be impacting our businesses and our operations. That's a great point. And so, when you are working with personal injury attorneys right now, what are some of the biggest operational areas where you're seeing technology come in as a support?
Well, I mean, certainly you have the classic ones. I mean, medical chronology, it's used euphemistically with demands. Some firms, when you're talking with them, um, they'll use the phrase demand, but they really mean just kind of reviewing the medical records and using it internally. There's lots of different use cases for that. That's easily kind of number one. But the other is that more and more firms are starting to build their own AI tools, and they're starting to, whether they're using Anthropic or, whatever, Gemini, however they want to do that, and we're really coming on and advising some firms on how that needs to be structured, how that needs to be implemented, how that needs to be executed. And I think that there is really a simplistic understanding, not everybody, but for the most part, there's a simplistic understanding of what software is and what it isn't, what built applications that are, available in AI can and cannot do. And so everybody wants to say, well, shoot, my case management software costs me $100,000 a year. I'm going to build my own AI to do that. I'm not sure that the technology is yet there, and it's certainly not robust enough to do that yet. And so that's kind of a huge area where we're coming in and saying, okay, well, you might have an esoteric workflow that a home-built AI can help you with, but you might want to look at, does it scale? What's the security of it?
Right.
Cybersecurity is a major issue. And I don't mean just the classic cybersecurity stuff. I mean, the data leakage that goes out. Where is your information going when you're using these generative tools? Do you know? If it gets leaked, what steps did you take to mitigate that exposure? A lot of firms we're talking to don't even think about that, believe it or not.
Well, and the more applications that you have with API keys coming into your AI, the more you are setting yourself up for exposure from a security standpoint. And beyond that, it's not just a matter of building your software, it's a matter of maintaining it going forward, because that's a huge additional expense, especially, Stacie, as you mentioned, technology is evolving so rapidly. In 6 months, your software is going to be obsolete, because that is just how fast technology is moving. And so I know you guys do so much more than advising with technology and software, and you guys really have a breadth of knowledge that you are able to lend to the law firms that you're working with. So talk to us a little bit more about what you guys have going on right now. I know you've got some exciting stuff coming out with PILMMA as well.
Yeah, no, we're really excited about that. We're launching I don't actually know what the commercial name for it is, but it's been called a number of Ken is a master of marketing, so I'm sure he'll come up with something really great. But essentially what we're doing is we're building out an operator's module where you're going to be able to be trained as a firm operator from top to bottom. Presently, we're still in the infancy of it, but the initial returns have been pretty strong. So we envision kind of a 12-month syllabus where we're kind of covering everything from how the non-attorney interacts with the attorneys, to managing HR, to dealing with cybersecurity. I mean, you name it, all these things that really sophisticated operators are just kind of second nature to them. I think one of the big things that we've realized just in a couple of years that we've been doing this is the most common operators at law firms are paralegals that have been promoted up into that world, which isn't necessarily bad in and of itself. But recall what I said earlier about the knowledge base just being the four corners of that particular law firm. And so they just haven't had the exposure. I mean, there's things that I've been exposed to in my career that the average person hasn't been exposed to. We've met people where the principal, unfortunately, was murdered. That's not something that I've had to deal with in my career,
Yeah, it's not
and
something
and
you can prepare for. Yeah.
yeah, and so, but those dynamics and understanding how to deal with those things, that's the kind of things that we're going to be teaching over the course of the year.
You recognize that there's kind of two paths for this operator's course. The classic one that we were just talking about, where it is a complete training program for those, operators that might have been paralegals before and don't know anything about really operations other than very limited view. But we also see a need for kind of high functioning operators needing their own like mastermind groups. Sometimes they are involved in these mastermind groups that we're in, the law firm owners, but sometimes they're not, and there's certain things that they can talk about and commiserate about and actually have, higher level experience. So we kind of see a separate group at some point for them, because I think they need that as well.
Yeah, most of these firms are using Gino Wickman's EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system. And so they have the concept of visionary, the integrator. The problem is that the integrator tends to be the detail person, and the visionary is like, I don't want to hear about the details. I just have this idea and make it happen. And in the abstract, that's great. That works. God knows in our career, we did that, and it worked great. However, sometimes the details are really like blockers, and there's really a lot of dynamics that need to be addressed to get those details aligned. I mean, that just as one who works with AI and Google, like there's many a slip between the cup and the lip, as they say, and it's really easy to say, oh, we're just going to generate content every day. Well, how exactly are you going to generate original content every day, law firm, that is going to be, important and contribute to the generative AIs picking you up and being relevant, all those sorts of things, just in one small example. And so they're coming back from a mastermind group that says, we're going to do content every day. And the operator's gonna be like, oh my God, shoot me in the face, right? Like, how are we gonna do that? And so, that's the kind of stuff that we're seeing that has to be managed, and you have to have the freedom, frankly, to be able to push back. And that's a skill that we're still mastering, right? Because typically we're working with principals or senior operators in our work with law firms, and we would be committing, our version of malpractice, not pushing back on some things. And that's our brand. If it's anything, it's candor. We're going to tell you we're not always right, but we're not frequently wrong either. And so we will say, speak truth to power and tell them where we think that they might be making mistakes. Some firms listen, some don't.
Well, and that's all you can do is you can be an advisor, and you can bring all the experience that you have beyond your own four corners, because you are out there, you're talking to people, you're seeing what works. You have your own experience building business, building technology, and integrating all of this. And I'm sure you've learned a lot from failures, a lot from successes, from both yourselves and other people. And all that knowledge comes together. And if you can teach somebody those skills to be able to identify what is likely to work and then what is likely not to work, that's a huge benefit. And especially as attorneys are coming out of law school, in law school, they teach you how to be a really great attorney. But what we hear time and time again is they don't teach you how to be a good business operator. And so he's a huge.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny that you bring that up. So my second son is in his second year of practice, and my youngest son is a 1L at Elon here in North Carolina. And I can now have a kind of a front row seat to that. I've always worked with the end product, right? The person who's been a lawyer and is typically a practice. And I can tell you unequivocally, they're not being prepared for the practice of law. They're not being prepared. They're certainly not being prepared. Forget business. They're not being prepared for the disruption that's coming with AI.
Yeah.
My 1L, he just finished contract. I'm like, hey man, don't lose too much sleep over that, because there's not if AI has improved anywhere with regard to the legal space, it's the ability to review a contract and do it in a top tier, top shelf way. And while yes, you need to understand the legal support of the different clauses and whatnot, the ability to read a contract tightly is going to be quickly commoditized by AI. And so it would be much better for them to focus, in my opinion, on how to communicate legal and esoteric concepts to the human, and being able to take those more kind of heady things and break them down to a layperson's level, far more beneficial to what the market needs as far as legal services goes. But law schools just haven't adapted. It's the same story we've heard over time, right? The model works. If it's not broke, don't mess it up, and they'll find out soon enough. Because the world is changing underneath their feet.
It is. It'll be really interesting to see what law school looks like now versus 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Oh,
If they come to adopt some of those strategies, and that ability to manage the AI as it applies to law, as well as having the raw skills to be able to go in and draft and write and do everything. Well,
Here's a great real world example. So I'm a lawyer, and I'm going to draft the pleading, and I'm going to go to AI, and I'm going to do it. How about the ability to look up the sites that the AI, created, and make sure that they're legitimate? Like, you could agree with the writing and say, that's tight. I like the strategy. I like all of these things, but you still need to be trained to go and pull the law and make sure that that's setting you up for your overall strategy. It would be far better for schools to be prepping kids to use AI in that context than to essentially say, well, AI is not going to, it's not going to change anything. It would almost be like, can you imagine accounting training up accountants and not talking about the use of Excel. I mean, it's just silly. It's just silly. You would never do it.
You would never do it. Yeah, you would never have an accounting school where it's like, here's your calculator and this is all you get to use. No, you need to know what tools you have at your disposal. And I think that's a great analogy. So I am so excited about PILMMA coming up. I can't wait to meet you guys and hear your guys' presentation. So, but tell me, as our last question here together, what are you looking forward to most about PILMMA this year?
Well, ladies first.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we were there last year and it was just fantastic just meeting so many firms from across the country and just talking to them. And again, hearing much like these masterminds, what they're struggling with, and seeing the commonalities, no matter what state or what size firm they are or what type of law they're practicing. It's fantastic. And everyone gets that opportunity at Summit.
I like interacting with old friends, and it's almost like a
reunion.
a reunion.
Yeah,
like a
every year.
high school reunion.
Like
you know,
homecoming.
Yeah. Because looking forward to some of the firms that we've seen from Summit or from Masterminds, and yeah, that is fun.
Yeah, you get to see them. You get to learn. If we didn't maintain contact with them, we get to hear what's working, what's not working, and kind of how they've evolved. So that's what I really like. I really like connecting with the people, and we're both. Stacie will tell you I'm a bigger nerd than her, but we're both nerds about this sort of thing, and so we like going and hearing what's working, what's not working. This is one of the premier events where a lot of the vendors will come out and they will showcase new tools and whatnot. So that's also very cool for us to see.
Yeah, that's going to be great. And of course, San Antonio, we're going to have some great food. So I'll tell you, I'm excited about that. Getting some good barbecue. We don't have a whole lot of that here in North Carolina. At least in my humble. And I'm going to get in trouble for saying that, though.
But I agree with you.
Thank you, Stacie. Well, thank you both.
I'm taking the fifth. I'm not commenting on it.
You're going to get in trouble over there. No. Thank you both for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure having you. That's going to wrap up today's episode of the Personal Injury Marketing Minute. If you want to learn more about Eric and Stacie, you can visit them at
evolvelaw.ai.
And if you are a personal injury firm looking to grow your practice and get some more leads, feel free to contact me at lindsey@optimizemyfirm.com. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you don't miss any of the other Spotlight on PILMMA series episodes. And stay tuned for more great information. Again, thank you, Eric and Stacie. It's been absolutely a pleasure having you today.
Thanks, Lindsey. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.